I'm so glad to have you with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. This is episode number 127. Today we are talking about affectionate limits. A lot of times people think when they love their children, when they're being so affectionate and so sweet to them, that it doesn't include any discipline. I couldn't disagree with you more strongly. As we've talked about, every coin has two sides, a head and a tail, and the coin never loses its value. So I believe that the valuable coin of love in life has both emotion, kindness, gentleness, this really sweet part, and discipline, the necessity of setting limits and establishing firm guidelines, holding to them, and even when necessary, enforcing them strongly. So today we're going to talk about affectionate limits. Sometimes people want a life without any limitations. Don't tell me what I can't do. Don't don't tell me that I'm not going to be able to, some of us just really hate limits. We want a limitless world. There were a group of medical personnel and scientists back in the 60s who used LSD and other hallucinogenic drugs rather liberally to expand their minds. They did not want to have limits of any kind. A number of them went insane. A few of them went on such bad trips that they killed themselves. A few of them ended up locked away permanently so they could no longer endanger themselves or others. Many of them went on to live reasonably productive lives, but most of them talked about the implications of what they had done. They did not think of it as a positive experience. I give that to you informationally because sometimes certain people who want a life without limits pursue it and find out it was nothing like they imagined. Let me tell you another person who pursued a life without limits and found great destruction in the path of that decision. And that person would be Idi Amin. If you don't know who he was a dictator in Africa. He literally started kidnapping little children, taught them how to handle a gun, and forced them to kill their families. He wanted no limitations on his power, and he wanted those children to have unlimited consciences. In other words, they could kill whomever they wanted, and they could have this crazy life and get drunk and do whatever they wanted. I mean 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. For those of you who do not know, I have taught school in Africa, both to little children and to adults at the university level. And I actually met a few kids, but they were teenagers by this time, who had been involved in that whole situation with Idi Amin. And they said the idea was that I would have unlimited power and unlimited freedom, but it really made me the worst kind of slave of all. I think oftentimes that is the human experience. We are looking for something without limitations, and we find ourselves slaves instead. So that's why I'm calling this Affectionate Limits. I believe it is a demonstration of great love as a parent to put limits on your child. That means they can't run out into the street whenever they feel like it, because there's a truck coming and they don't have enough sense to know that they're going to be torn apart limb from limb and squashed on the pavement and their life will end. They don't have any idea. As the adult, you do understand that. And the limit is you may not go out into the street. You may not run out into the street. And you may not even run away from me when we're in the yard. That's an affectionate limit. That comes out of love. An affectionate limit is you're going to go to bed at 8:30, so hopefully you're asleep by 9 or 9:30 because you actually have a test tomorrow. You cannot stay up till midnight watching movies and think that tomorrow you're going to do well on your test because you're going to be exhausted and cranky and your mind isn't going to think clearly. That's an affectionate limit. Okay, so you get the idea. Now, let's talk about this at length for a minute because a lot of parents today say, oh, I don't want to limit my child and They'll never be the same again, and they'll learn to hate me, and they'll resent me. I just wish I could tell you some of the things I've heard in counseling situations. And we don't always think straight as adults in our world about what children need from us. There have been studies done. I do mean study after study after study after study. Kids actually have greater respect for parents who will discipline them and set limits. They have a greater affection for parents who care enough about them to set limits over their life. And actually, they function significantly better with appropriate limits set, which would lead us to the question, what are appropriate limits? Great question. You need to limit their time with electronics. It is a proven fact that a little child's mind cannot process electronics, all those visual images, all those noises, all that chaos that's on the screen right in front of their face, till they're about 3 to 3.5. If you're shutting your 2-year-old up by handing him your phone and letting him do all this crazy stuff, you're doing damage to your child. You can hate me forever for telling it to you. And frankly, I still won't apologize because this is for the well-being of your child. You limit their electronics. Once you hand it to them, you limit it to them for a few hours a day. And certainly no more than 2 to 2.5 hours before they go to bed, you take it away from them so that they have a quiet mind and they can sleep much more soundly. So you limit their use of electronics. You limit their intake of sugar and chemicals and food colorings. Lots of kids have developed allergies and sensitivities, kids with ADHD, certainly kids with autism and Asperger's. Lots and lots of kids don't do well with all this artificial stuff. What do you know? So you limit their intake of that, and you feed them fruits and fresh vegetables, and you learn how to cook, and you feed them whole grains and good quality meat. You take a hold of that diet and you limit the junk that you're putting into your kid's body, and you teach them to have respect for their own body, and so you establish their limits in terms of what they're eating. You establish limits in terms of their activity. They cannot be playing soccer and basketball and football and running track and doing baseball in the summer. That's insane. At some point, they need to know that it's perfectly okay to take it easy. So they need to choose 2 or 3 main activities for the year in which you will fully support them, but you need to establish limits in relationship to their activities. Just like a girl, she can't do ballet, tap, jazz, swimming lessons, horseback riding lessons, theater. I've seen kids literally who in the summertime, they have 17-hour schedules, and the mom is just running, running, running. If you have a 10 to 14-year-old and they have a 16 or 17-hour day because that's insanity, mom, dad. Love them enough to set a limit. I'm really serious about this. In fact, I'm even going to tell you why. Kids grow when they're asleep. All human beings do. They're not getting any sleep. They're not growing. In those years, like 10 to 14 especially, maybe even 15 for some boys, those kids need to be sleeping 10 or 12 hours a night. Yeah, let me repeat that for you because that freaks most people out the first time they hear it. This is my subject, you understand, as a maternal child nurse who understands pregnancy and the development of normal human beings. It's a huge, big deal. Kids need to sleep 10 to 12 hours a night. In the summertime, when they actually can, you need to let them. Now, this doesn't mean they can go to bed at 2 in the morning, sleep till 2 in the afternoon. That's not what I'm telling you. But you can certainly tell them, especially when they're used to it, because their whole life, you've established limits and you take their electronics away from them by 7:30 or 8. At 10 o'clock at night, they're in bed. And they can sleep till 10 the next day and still actually get some things done. It is your responsibility as their parent to establish limits because you love them. So you want to limit the chaos and the busyness of their schedule. They do not need to go 90 all the time. I don't care if their friends are. Big deal. They really don't need to do it, and you need to establish that limit. Of course, we all understand. Ha, they don't need to have unlimited freedom to, I'm going to use this language that I've heard parents in counseling do, express themselves. I hate your guts. You're a jerk. I mean, I have heard 3 and 4 year olds talk to their parents like that. That's on the mom. That's on the dad. You need to learn very young in their lives to establish limits as to what their behavior is going to look like. You can feel everything you want to feel, and you can say it. You can say it to me. My kids have said it to me. Mom, I hate your guts. And that's how they said it. They can say anything to me calmly and respectfully, but not disrespectfully, and certainly not go off on a tirade. That's not allowed. So you've got to establish those limits. We will discuss anything. You want to tell me that you've been smoking dope with your friends and you want to stop and you don't really know how and you don't think this is a good idea and you heard about somebody getting a hold of fentanyl in a doobie, like, yeah, honey, you do need to quit. And I'm glad you came and talked to me. You need to put those parameters down about everything in the world, that your kid can have unlimited communication with you, but it's going to be done in a respectful manner. And you're going to learn how to do this in a productive way. That's on you, mom. That's on you, dad. You've got to teach those kids how to have communication with you. So I believe in unlimited communication, but I don't believe in unlimited emotional, dump all over me or anybody else. So because you love them, you establish limits for them. Do you know when you drive down the road, there's a speed limit sign? There's a reason for that. Because you go 85 miles an hour through a residential district and you kill a child needlessly, it's dangerous and it's foolish. All of us live with limits every single day. We definitely do. You're doing your child a great disservice if you are not teaching him or her that the world has limits. And so it really is an act of great love to teach them there are limits. And I am going to set some for you. And we as a family are going to have limits. And we are all going to live within those limits. Let me say this to you. If you don't have very many limits on your own life, you stay up till 1:30 or 2 in the morning, you drag your behind out of bed at 10:30. Your kid's already been up for an hour or two. He had a big bowl of cereal. He's watching anything he wants to on that television set because you have no parental limits set on there. And you kind of drag your bones in and have a cup of coffee and sit down, and the kid starts asking you, what about this and what about that? And you're like, get away from me a minute. I'm not even awake yet. See, you're not going to establish any limits for your child because you don't have any limits for yourself. That means you might have to change some things. Parenting is a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. If you want your child to understand how life really works and how life works so that it is orderly and calm and reasonable, you might actually have to set some limits for yourself. You might have to learn to love yourself enough to establish some limits. I would really appreciate your questions and comments. If you would like a greater understanding about some of the things that it means to establish limits or would like to have a conversation with me, please go to paintabeautifulpicture.com and look for resources. And I just hope this kind of has opened up your thinking that establishing limits in your family is a matter of love. The challenge question of the day is this: how am I doing at establishing limits in my household? Because very truthfully, the first limits might need to be with yourself and then with your child. It's been a great joy having you with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. I will see you soon. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.